My name's Dylan Yarbrough, and I'm a student at Columbia College Chicago working on my MFA in photography, and I'll be graduating in May. I'm also a curatorial assistant at the Museum of Contemporary Photography and have been teaching my first class in photography this semester. So I'm originally from a very small town called Sheridan in Arkansas, and then moved to Little Rock where I got my undergraduate education before moving to Chicago to pursue my MFA. So for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to be an artist. I just didn't quite know what that was going to be as I grew up. I started as far back as middle school, and I was mostly doing like drawings and watercolor paintings. And then as I got into high school, I got really into doing oil and acrylic painting. As I got into college, I started having all these anxieties about being a living, working, productive, creative person and how I was actually going to afford to live off of, my art. And so I got really concerned that painting wasn't going to be able to sustain myself. So I got into graphic design for several years and did a lot of logo projects and website projects and things like that. But eventually I started realizing that really good graphic designers used really good photography. This was my calling, and photography was what I wanted to do with my life, and so I made the switch. The first photographer that made me want to be a photographer was Alex Soth. He's inspired a whole generation of photographers, and some may even say that that's cliche to use him as a reference, but it truly was the first time that I saw a photograph and realized that it could do something more than just being a commercial or for an advertising project. I saw a poster of his in my undergraduate photography facility, and the image was actually made in the South, and so I felt this connection and this representation of where I lived, the place that I grew up, and it made me really interested in what photography could do. The rest was history, so I took my first photography class based on seeing Soth's work, and then I just kept going and realizing that photography could be fine art. When working with photography students, the most important thing that I focus on is the idea of visual literacy. And that's the idea that no matter what photographer you want to be, we all need to be able to look at images and interpret them and talk about them comfortably. And so with every student, we work on picking out images from contemporary photographies and really looking at it long enough to try to understand what's going on. So we look at the image and we ask simple questions like, what's going on in this photograph? And what do you see that makes you say that? What do you think that this artist was trying to accomplish? And then how does that photograph fit in within our visual culture? So really just trying to lead students through these questions of engaging with photography so that they can understand a little bit more about the medium and also the world that photographs live in. Today I'm actually sitting in front of my most recent project that's installed in the Arcade Gallery in downtown Chicago. I recently completed this project over the summer of 2019, working for the Stuart Abelson Fellowship, which is a fellowship available to Columbia College MFA photography students who are hoping to travel and complete a research project. So this basically documents a community that gathers around a public sauna in Helsinki, Finland. This place started several years ago because someone found a wood-burning stove on the edge of the Baltic Sea and decided to create a sauna. And what happened is the city, of course, hadn't given permission for these people to do that, and so there was this battle of whether or not they were allowed to do it. The city tore it down at one point, but they rebuilt it. Someone else vandalized it and burned it down. They rebuilt it, and it created this cultural war that lasted for several years until eventually the city just gave them permission and a cultural award to be there. One project that I want to try is to make a photography series that's more socially engaged, dealing with issues of like social justice or economic justice. I feel like that call to action and that need to use photography as a tool to elevate people's voices that may be being left behind. I think the thing that I could have a voice on is housing. Even before I lived in my first college dorm, I think I lived in over 20 different houses. My mom and my sister and I were constantly trying to find a place to live. I think that moving forward in my photographic career, it could be a really interesting thing to work on, both for myself personally, but also it could benefit other people. So I'm looking at doing a project in Chicago that talks about some of the issues around housing. Columbia has really been an amazing experience. I think that I've made lifelong connections and lifelong friends and have really found a space where I could be myself, create my art, and be supported by a group of people that are very generous and want to see me succeed as much as themselves.